Are you cooked with James Cook in the fantasy playoffs?
You can't see it, but I do have his signed football here behind me. That's how much of a fan of Brian Thomas I am.
You're want to swing for something that's more of a ceiling play now if you've got a guy like Cooper Kupp.
And president of band kickers. But you're my vice president, I'll give you that. If I ever die, you take it over.
Hello and welcome to the Fantasy Life Show. Happy freaking Friday, everybody. I'm your host, Ian Hartitz. It is a great day to be great, and it's a great day to break down the, few eventful things that happen on Thursday Night Football, all the fantasy relevant injuries ahead of Week 15, and also, some good schedule, strength of, best of, worst of goodness as we get into the fantasy playoffs. So joining me, as always, Dwain McFarland. You guys know him, but we have a truly special guest alongside him, the one, the only, Jake Ciely, senior writer over at The Athletic, host of All In Fantasy, and most importantly, a fellow supporter of the Band Kickers movement. Jake, great to have you on, man.
It's great to be on, but I did a little head shake there. What do you mean supporter? I'm the originator. Like the t-shirt is behind me of Band Kickers, just on my set. The originator of Band Kickers. At least get that part right.
Here I was thinking that, a bunch of us were co-leaders of this movement, but Jake is our fearless leader. All right, Jake, I'll give you that. So, Dwain, you don't hate kickers as much of us, but, you're still a cool guy.
Well, look, you guys both rub off on me. I'm kind of indifferent to kickers. So, it's the same thing, really, right? So any league where kickers have been banned, I enjoy those leagues more. I'm very open about that. But I do have some leagues where I've got buddies. They still want kickers, man. Like our league's been around like 20 years and they just can't do without their kickers. So I don't fight about it too much. I just go with the flow and I'm like, all right, I got other things to worry about in life.
Well, certainly a big Thursday night for kicker fanatics out there, at least, because not a single touchdown was scored. Shout out to Fantasy Life's own Cooter Doodle, turned 10 cents into, I believe, $24 plus 24,000 odds that no touchdown will be scored. So Queens stay Queens over there. But yeah, guys, Rams 12 and the 49ers scored just 6 points. Shout out to the Rams for winning as 3-point dogs. The under cashed here of 48.5. And unfortunately, if you started pretty much anyone in Fantasyland, you were likely to be disappointed. Yeah, sure, Puka Nacua wound up getting up to 17.8 points, but essentially nobody reached their projected point total. And yeah, it was disappointing. So we will start off with the Rams. And Jake, no one was more disappointing than Cooper Kupp, who, congrats, guys, we had as many yards as him last night.
Hey, we did. Whopping 3 targets, too. That game was a mess from day one, but I would say, look, this is going forward. We know what happens in this type of situation. You're behind. Now you start have to shoot for ceiling in the rest of your lineup. Cooper Kupp would be fine. Even if we know this going into the game, it'd be like 3 targets. We'd probably like, hey, still worth the risk as a wide receiver 3 because he might get a touchdown. But, nobody expected this on either side of it.
Just absolutely brutal, Dwayne. Now, we did get our one true king, Puka Nacua, making the most out of his opportunities. Caught 7 of 8 targets for 97 yards. But yeah, turns out in a game with no touchdowns, couldn't be happy with just about anyone. So, Dwayne, just general sentiment with Jake in terms of now we need to shoot for the ceiling. And do you maybe have any longer term concern with Kupp?
Well, I think it's pretty clear that Nacua has become the number one. He's the younger guy. He might even be healthier. We talk about these injuries all the time. High ankle sprains. You usually hear it at the end of the year after everything's over. It's like, oh yeah, that really bothered me all year. So sometimes we dismiss that. But Cooper Kupp, he's getting up there in age. I think when we look at next season, you're clearly looking at Nacua as the number one. We already were this year, but we had him tight. And look, it's not like Cooper Kupp's been terrible. He still has a 28% target share since week 10, and those are all healthy games with Puka Nacua. So it's not like he's been bad. He just came up with that dud last night. But to Jake's point, especially when you start looking at your wide receiver 3 position, your flex position, a lot of your stuff, like your running back 1 and 2 are probably going to be your normal decisions. Wide receiver 1 and 2, maybe sometimes your 2 in those conversations changes a little bit. But it's typically whenever I get the questions about this third wide receiver or the second flex player, and you guys that know what you're doing and you actually start more players in your leagues. If you're not, guys, come on, catch up. Don't leave all those players on the bench. That's how you beat your opponents and you become better than them, is you got to make them start more players and expose their weakness. But you get to players like Ray McLeod. he's a floor play, right? You want to swing for something that's more of a ceiling play now if you've got a guy like Cooper Kupp. So you want someone that could give you the 2 touchdowns. Ray McCloud's probably going to give you 5 catches and 50 yards. That's going to be a nice 10 points, but he's not very likely to have any shot to give you 25. So he's a good example of what a floor play looks like. You're going to want to swing for someone that could give you the touchdown upside. So typically, I'm targeting the games that have the higher totals, all the things we talk about all the time, but it's got to be the player. It really comes down to the player. Have they shown they have that upside to, even if they haven't done it, a lot this season, that they can give you more than 1 touchdown?
I'll throw Christian Watson out there as an example. I know he's a long time been a favorite of Dwayne's over here. So hopefully these other games won't be as impacted by Mother Nature. Was a lot of rain going down, particularly in that second quarter. Accordingly, Matthew Stafford just 160 scoreless yards. Honestly, should have been picked off on each of the first 2 drives. And now per PFF leads the NFL with 8 dropped interceptions this season. In second place, Jameis Winston, because of course he is. So that was the Rams side of the football. And now on to the 49ers. Yeah, just pretty much a worse version of what we just talked about with the Rams. Just 142 yards for Brock Purdy. Isaac Guerendo got 20 touches. I think we all would have signed up for that happily had we known that was going to be the case. Unfortunately, only wound up getting, 75 total yards. So Jake, Guerendo didn't kill us. I guess the good news is hopefully if you can make it past this round, or in a better case scenario, you had to bye, we should be feeling very good about his grasp on the overall RB1 job.
I would feel terrific coming out of that game last night. And go back real quick to your previous one. I'd throw Westbrook-Akina over a Demario Douglas if you're talking about floor versus ceiling this week, just to chase something like that. But yes, with the Guerendo, you couldn't feel better because he was limited, no practice, comes in, questions of how much the workload is going to be there, if they're going to bring in Patrick Taylor to kind of ease him back in and say, you know what, we'll see what we have. But basically, bell cow what we want to see in Guerendo, anybody taking over this 49ers offense. Of course, the game wasn't great as we expected, but the Rams have been much better against the run as of late. Despite those 2 big games, there are 2 elite running backs that they faced. Outside of that, they've been limiting a lot of players against them. So the weather, a lot of factors in there. The only concern we would have for Isaac Guerendo, I think, comes down to his quarterback and whether or not the 49ers at some point say, you know what, we're just toast this year with all the injuries, and Brock Purdy ends up sitting. Then I'd be more worried about Guerendo, but I'd say Guerendo top 20 rest of the season as long as Brock Purdy's under center.
Dwayne, we already have the utilization data up at fantasylife.com. Good job by you and our developers as always. But 8.1 utilization score for Guerendo. That's pretty good, man. And, not the easiest matchups the rest of the way, Dolphins and Lions, but I tend to agree with Jake here. Should be in far more lineups than not for these last 2 weeks.
Yeah, so if we just take the last 2 weeks now, he's also at an 8.1 utilization score. 57% of his comps over the last 4 years finished as a low-end running back 1. So that's running back 7 to 12. We just split it into high-end and low-end for the sake of the utilization report. The other 29% finished as high-end running back 2s, and then 14% were low-end running back 2s. So you've got a running back 2 at a minimum, but it looks more likely like you've got a low-end running back 1 the rest of the way. I don't really see any of these other guys challenging him as long as he can get healthy, and there's not anything else that just makes the 49ers, being in the situation they're in, they're out of the playoffs. What is it, like a 0.1% chance of them getting in? But Guerendo is the type of player we should really see them be willing to just feed. Like, they know they're not going to feature him next year, right? You're going to get Christian McCaffrey, Jordan Mason, all these other guys back. So I would think that he's probably in for this workload the rest of the way.
Otherwise, yeah, just a lot of disappointment here, making us wonder why we love this fantasy football game so much. But Juwan Jennings, 2 catches, 31 scoreless yards, got 9 targets, but again, 2 drops certainly did seem to be impacted by the rain. Deebo Samuel, they tried to get that squeaky wheel going, but turns out when the tire is flat, you can't do too much with it. Shout out Davis Paddock for that joke. But yeah, he dropped what could have been a 29-yard touchdown, only had 3 rushing yards, guys. Now 75th among 76 qualified running backs and wide receivers in yards per carry. Yikes. George Kittle did have a solid enough game with 61 yards on 7 targets. But I think 49ers linebacker Devondre Campbell actually kind of spoke for all of us by basically refusing to enter the game in the second half, doing his best Vontae Davis impression, quitting on his team there. So not great there. But you know what, guys? We do have a great rest of the show planned. So appreciate you listening again to our Thursday night breakdown. Now we're getting into some of the best and worst schedules ahead of the fantasy playoffs right after a quick word to our friends over at Knockaround. Love me some knockaround. I'll get the Ram shades on with these blue and yellow goodness going on. How can you not love these affordable, high quality, and I would argue great looking sunglasses that, again, guys, you can find for less than $50. Go ahead and check out knockaround.com for all of your holiday shopping needs. Again, all of their sunglasses have UV 400 protection for your peepers in this officially licensed NFL collection I am rocking right now. As you can see, not overwhelming, but you are supporting your team with pride. So knockaround.com, make sure you use code LIFE for free shipping. Again, affordable, great looking, and high quality sunglasses. Can't beat that. Only at knockaround.com. And again, that's code LIFE, LIFE, for free shipping on your order. All right, fellas, it is the fantasy playoffs, which means as much as we would like to start our studs, trust the guys who got us there, we also need to be mindful of those ever important matchups to try to maybe get that ever important tiebreaker when we need to, make the best decision. So Jake got some handy dandy charts looking at, again, the easiest and hardest schedules by position. Going to start things off with quarterback, though. And the top 5 easiest stretches in terms of fantasy points per game allowed over these next 3 weeks, we had the Titans, Giants, Raiders, Cardinals, and the Panthers. So 4 of those 5 teams have quarterbacks that we are not very interested in fantasy land. That said, Kyler Murray is standing out as someone who, yes, has been volatile this season, but maybe, just maybe, Jake, with the fantasy championship on the line, he can come through for us. Are you buying it?
Slightly buying it. The biggest thing I think you said in that preamble is the fact that it's been inconsistent. There's no consistency. Like when I'm breaking it down this entire year, there's not like, hey, a heavy man coverage team, Kyler does better. Nope, heavy zone coverage team is actually when he does better, but Marvin Harrison does better against man coverage. It's like there's no consistency in their wide receivers. There's only consistency with Trey McBride. There's no consistency in the backfield, as we've seen, and they take James Conner off the field when they're down by a touchdown or up by a touchdown. This team has zero consistency. I think that's your biggest point there. So even with the schedule, I say yes, mildly, he's going to be a back-end quarterback one for me every single week, but you have to understand that there's nothing, maybe Dwayne has something more than I do, but there's nothing I've been able to find this entire year that tells me definitively on matchup that we can predict a top 10 performance or the 20th performance as we've seen him put out a couple times this year. So yes, schedule definitely helps, but I'm not guaranteeing it.
Dwayne, have you found anything?
Yeah, have I found anything? Yeah, that the fantasy gods are cruel. I mean, look at this list. Do you like Will Levis? Will Levis, we can use him. We can use Tommy DeVito, we can use, we don't even know if we can use Aiden O'Connell. It might be Desmond Ridder. I mean, this is just hilarious, right? I mean, maybe Bryce Young should be the other answer. But yeah, you're going to start your studs over all of these guys. I'll throw a couple of other names in the mix, not quite as strong as these, but you do have the Chargers. The Chargers get the Bucks. Tough matchup then after that against the Broncos, but then you get the Patriots. So Justin Herbert is a name to remember. And then I would say going a little further down, like looking at Baker, who's obviously been one of the top 5 quarterbacks already of the season. Kind of a tougher matchup this weekend against the Chargers, but then you get the Cowboys and you get the Panthers the next 2 weeks. So a little more interested in those names, obviously, than some of these other guys that we just really don't want anywhere near our lineup, no matter who the matchup is.
Kyler in our fantasy life ranks this year. Again, coming in as a consensus top 12 quarterback, albeit not quite that top 5 ceiling we were hoping for when we drafted him back in August. So not great so far, guys. But again, Patriots, Panthers, and Rams to end the season. Maybe we do see some booms out of Kyler. Jake, we went over the easiest, but now also some of the hardest fantasy schedules for quarterbacks coming up. And, not conveniently for us, this happens to include a lot more guys that we are usually interested in. So we have Jared Goff and the Lions, Drake May and the Patriots, Sam Darnold and the Vikings, obviously Geno Smith and the Seahawks, and then as we saw last night, Brock Purdy and the 49ers. So I want to specifically look at Jared Goff, and shout out to our lovely producer, Matt Swing. Will Jared Goff roar or purr in the fantasy playoffs, Jake?
I think we're leaning more towards per. This is what we as the fantasy community were pointing at the entire year, even in pre-draft season when we were talking about, hey, it's not just the fact of what Goff finishes with, it's that the last 2 games are outdoors. And what do we know about Jared Goff outdoors? A completely different quarterback. But we've seen at times that he can come through on an efficiency base, but I don't think we'd want to rely on that also because these defenses, while really bad for passing, you can take advantage of the run game, especially against the Bills. Even the 49ers, as we just saw last night, as much of that as stink as it was, the 49ers haven't been shut down in the run game. So I think that when you look at the Lions and know how easily they can turn to that backfield, I think there's a good chance that Jared Goff shouldn't be in your lineup for any of the 3 games.
Dwayne's coming in as QB 11 and QB 12 for us, respectively, ahead of a shootout against the Bills. But these next 2 weeks after, going to have to deal with some December Chicago weather. And then he has to go across the country to take on the 49ers at Candlestick, whatever the hell they call it now. But thoughts on Goff here, Dwayne, over the next few weeks?
I'm with Jake. I mean, we're not ever elated about putting Goff in our lineup. We do realize, though, any week he can give you that big boom upside. Like, he's got multiple 25-point games this year. So, I mean, the Lions have an offense that's good enough to beat anyone, right? So, also in any one of these games, like we just saw last week, against Buffalo, I mean, Stafford totally torched them. I think they're more of a bend but don't break. And sometimes they do break. And Lions have the weapons to break you. Look at the Bears. They've really not been that good over the last 4 games. So I could also see this completely going the other way just because the Lions are so good. But I am with Jake where it's like, okay, like if I'm choosing between guys, I'd rather not have to choose Jared Goff. But I do think that the Lions have the weapons to where it really doesn't matter what defense they're playing. They're going to be better than, these other quarterbacks we talked about that have great matchups that aren't very good. I would still take Jared Goff in a bad matchup over those kind of guys, I guess would be the best thing to say. And then there's the Vikings are also on this list. But, man, I trust Sam Darnold. Like, you've got all the weapons around you. You've got Kevin O'Connell. We've got the Bears on here. I just talked about it. Over the last 4 to 6 games, the Bears secondary has not been near as good as what it was early in the season. So I don't worry about that. Now, they do face the Seahawks the next week. And over, like, the last, I think since week 8, the number 1 EPA defense per play. So the Seahawks, they've been pretty legit down the stretch. So that's a little bit of a tougher one. But then you get the Packers. I guess that all comes down to, do they have Jair Alexander or not? Like, they just seem they're kind of a different defense when they do and don't have the guy. So I think these are all games, though, when you look at the Green Bay game, it could be very meaningful, right? And so that still has shootout potential. So also not that worried about Sam Darnold. And just the fact that he's shown us in these last 4 to 5 games, he's been better against the good defenses. It's forced him to find his other weapons. That's really unlocked Jordan Addison. Obviously, Justin Jefferson's still doing his thing, but you got a more diverse offense right now. And I think, the Vikings are honestly playing as good as they could hope to be playing, trying to get ready for this playoff run, including your fantasy playoffs.
Good shout out on the Bears. Turning to a bit of a fugazi recently here, Dwayne. They actually are just 30th in the EPA allowed per dropback. Since week 10, only the Falcons and Jets have been worse. So yes, and Sam Darnold we trust, top 6 quarterback in our fantasy rankings. What a time to be alive. Let's move on to some running back schedules though, guys. Looking at some of the easiest ones here moving forward. We have the Jets probably without Breece Hall. So shout out Brandon Allen and Isaiah Davis getting to eat there. Lions who you're feeling good about. The Titans, the Vikings, and the Cardinals. So again, kind of know what we're getting in terms of those Vikings and Cardinals backfields with our guys Aaron Jones and James Conner eating. But Jake, maybe Tony Pollard has a chance to help carry us to fantasy championships, so long as that ankle injury isn't a big deal.
Yeah, the ankle injury, and can you tell me ahead of time that they're leading or in contention for all these games? Because that's what I need to know. The biggest thing with Tony Pollard is I looked this up before this show as well, as 16 plus carries, fantasy points per game, 15. That's every single game he's had 16 plus carries, 15 fantasy points. By the way, that would rank him as RB11 on the season. So Tony Pollard, if he's getting the work, an RB1. The biggest thing, as I just mentioned, is, we see the Bengals and they can't stop anybody, but what if they fall behind and all of a sudden it's Tajay Spears eating into that? All of a sudden Tony Pollard doesn't get 15 carries, maybe only gets 10 because Spears is on the field. That's really what it comes down to. I'm less concerned about the 2 weeks following this first one against the Bengals. But again, we just saw the Titans last week where it's like, hey, this is what it should be, and they can't even beat the Jaguars who they get to face again. So it should be Tony Pollard season. It should be RB1 performance going forward, but I'm not going to put the guarantee lock on that one.
Mentioned the ankle injury, Jake. He has not practiced yet this week. It's been one of these situations throughout the year, though, where we've seen Pollard miss plenty of practice, even enter games questionable, and then have his usual role. But God forbid, let's say that Pollard does miss this week. Would it be as easy as, just literally crossing out his name and putting Tajay Spears in there for your ranks, Jake?
It wouldn't be quite to his level, but I'd say that Tajay Spears, off the top of my head, would be creeping inside the top 20, especially with all the other injuries we're dealing with, as you mentioned, Breece Hall, potentially Bucky Irving, and all the rest. He would be not quite as high, but he would be inside the top 20.
certainly one of the better handcuffs out there. I'm with you. I don't think it's the Tyler Algier situation or Blake Corum where we're talking about legit RB1 level handcuffs, but still top 20 more lineups than not, and feeling good about it accordingly. So those were the easiest schedules, guys. But on the other side of things, we do have some harder ones to worry about, specifically the Steelers, Chiefs, Texans, Bears, and Bills, looking like they could have a tougher time finding those, bigger running lanes than usual. So, Jake, are you cooked with James Cook in the fantasy playoffs?
I think people feel that way after last week. I don't think we are, only because this isn't James Cook from last year. If it was James Cook from last year, I'd be like 100%. But they're using him inside the goal line situations. They're using him to run into the end zone. They're taking a little bit off Josh Allen's plate in that area, as people have been screaming for the past couple of years. So, yeah, it looks really bad coming off that game. And there is the threat of that happening any given week. But I don't think this is a matchup situation, kind of similar to Dwayne was saying before with the Lions. Sure, it looks bad, but as the Bills offense can do, super efficient, and they can get James Cook a touchdown or two even when he only gets 30 yards. I don't love that we have to hate like kind of relying on the touchdown, but at the same time, it kind of, again, to go to what Dwayne said before, is who are we benching James Cook for? He's still going to be inside your top 20, worst top 25. You're not going to bench him for people with really good matchup that stink.
Thank God I mostly told people to, yes, go ahead and start James Cook over Isaac Guerrero last night. We'll see. That maybe doesn't even pay off. I mean, he did finish as just the RB 37 last week. But I guess, Dwayne, the only thing that makes life a bit tougher than it should be for James Cook fantasy managers is the reality that when they do get in these more up-tempo, comeback game scripts like we saw last week, there's a lot more Ty Johnson than we would prefer to see on passing downs.
Yeah, they use Ty Johnson quite a bit on passing downs, which I don't understand because, honestly, that is James Cook. James Cook, that's like his forte. Those should be the games where theoretically it's like, oh my God, it's a James Cook game. We're going to get like 25 fantasy points. But no, we got to get Ty Johnson out there. I don't quite understand it. And not saying, look, that's not the knock Ty Johnson. He's actually good in that role, probably better than what most people think. But James Cook could also be handling it. So obviously it's just a rotation where they don't want to feed any of these guys too much. A little bit worried over the last few weeks, though, Ian. James Cook rushing attempt shares down to 29%. 37% and 35%. That's not really due to the other running backs. That's due to Josh Allen becoming more involved in the ground game. And then over the last two games, we've got 0% of the carries inside the 5-yard line. That's a really small sample, guys, and that's a number that can bounce around pretty easily. But Josh Allen is more willing to call his own number. We've seen that historically in these games where it comes down to crunch time and playoff seeding and those sort of things are on the line. And I think the Bills did a nice job of saving him for this year. He wasn't doing as much of that early in the season, so we'll see how that plays out. That's a little bit of a knock on James Cook, but to Jake's point, look, man, it's James Cook. He's playing on the Bills, one of the best offenses in the NFL. And honestly, once you get past the matchup this week, you're fine. So really, that's the big matchup holding him down in the playoffs. Once you get to those next two games, you're really fine with the outlook for James Cook. Just got to get past that stingy Lions defense this weekend.
We'll say, and Lions are so well coached and just such a good team overall that they can be playing all these backups in their front seven and they're still kind of getting by. But I wouldn't be surprised if we see the Bills take a little bit of a page out of the Packers playbook and still try to run the ball on them. Again, a shell of what they really did look like in the earlier portions of the season. So we'll see there. But yeah, even if he is more of a lower, middle class man's version of Saquon Barkley due to Josh Allen getting all those carries at the goal line and not checking it down too much, hey, still a great offense and still a player that we know has that home run ability. So good stuff there, guys. Now we're getting some wide receiver easiest and hardest schedules right after a quick word to our friends over at Game Time. Guys, we both know there's nothing like being at a game in person, especially when you do get to go catch, in my opinion, the two greatest sports to go see live, hockey, games, and probably MMA fights. Haven't been to a boxing fight just yet, but my God, something about it, guys, just the adrenaline, the atmosphere. I freaking love it. And accordingly, Game Time is my go-to for finding amazing tickets, but not just for sports, also for concerts and shows too. I was actually scrolling through the Game Time app the other day and I came across this new feature called Game Time Picks. And let me tell you, it is a total game changer. Game Time Picks curates your experience, showing you the best deals on great seats. And Game Time makes it so easy that it's truly a no-brainer, people. Seriously, Game Time takes all of the guesswork out of buying tickets, and you can find out for yourself by downloading the Game Time app, creating an account using code LIFE for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply, but again, create an account and redeem code LIFE, L-I-F-E, for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today because what time is it? Game time. Always ready to run through a brick wall, just like maybe these wide receivers are guys with some of the easiest schedules ahead of the fantasy playoffs. Raiders, Giants, Bears, Packers, and Titans really standing out. And Jake, want to talk about, again, the man with the best schedule of them all, Jakobi Meyers, maybe has a chance to be a sneaky solid league winner of 2024, albeit things could be a bit more complicated if we have to deal with Desmond Ridder under center ahead of Monday night.
I'm not actually too worried about the Ridder versus O'Connell, given what they do stylistically. Look at Ridder last year. It's actually pretty much okay for Jakobi Meyers. The thing I was with you is when you said, okay, solid, and then you threw in league winner. That's where you lost me. Yes, okay, solid. Wide receiver 3, if you go all the way back to week 5 with his first double-digit game, if you look at him, he's a wide receiver 3 in fantasy points per game. We're talking about earlier, throughout Demario Douglas, and we're talking about those floor options, Dwayne throughout Ray McLeod. He's a floor option. He's a higher level floor option, but he's that solid wide receiver 3 that's probably not going to leave you with 5 fantasy points. So yes, he'll probably be in a lot of mainstays of lineups, but I don't think that put it this way, we're talking about what just happened on Thursday Night Football, and Jakobi Meyers was your 3. And I'm going to say, if I'm going back to the Westbrook-Akina and I need to shoot for the ceiling, I know Westbrook-Akina can leave you with a 0, but he could also get 20. Jakobi's just never getting 20. And I think that's how you have to look at him. Yes, I want him in all my lineups, but there's a chance that he could fall out of it just because I might be shooting for a higher ceiling any given week.
Look, Jake, I've been a big supporter of the Nick Westbrook-Akini movement. Dwayne knows I've been shouting him out all year. You really would play Nick Westbrook-Akini over Jakobi Meyers, though?
If I'm shooting for ceiling, 100%, no question about it. Ooh. Did we not just watch what Cooper Rush did against the Bengals? 100% I'm shooting for the ceiling.
Dwayne, thoughts?
Yeah, I would go the opposite way, but it is tough. I'm a little lower on what we're getting from Desmond Ridder than where Jake is at. But generally speaking, I think we're talking about similar caliber, right, quarterbacks. Yeah. It's just that Aiden O'Connell did recently throw for over 300 yards. I don't know that Desmond Ridder's ever going to do that. I mean, we'll see. I'll keep my fingers crossed. So I do have worries about, the quarterback, but I think that Jakobi Meyers is just on another level versus Westbrook-Akini. I mean, you look at his target earning ability, you look at his air yards. He's not just a pure dink and dunk underneath guy. If you look at him since Devontae Adams left, the lineup, we've only got really one dud from a fantasy perspective. And to Jake's point, not been as much upside, only one wide receiver, 1 finish in there as well. But man, give me a guy that can probably get 8 to 10 targets versus a guy that can get 3 to 4. I think when you're talking about guys like that, as long as they're not tied to the line of scrimmage, when we talk about Demario Douglas and we talk about Ray McLeod, they're much more tied to that line of scrimmage. Jakobi Meyers still gets targets down the field. So I would still lean to Jakobi Meyers over a guy like Nick Westbrook-Akini. But I do understand where Jake's coming from, because I did want to point out the Titans here. You talk about a guy, with Calvin Ridley, since we've had DeAndre Hopkins out of the lineup. I know we don't really like Will Levis, but I'm good with the air yards. I'm good with the targets. There's a little bit of a tease here. We're going to talk about Calvin Ridley later in the show. Who's the one other team I would talk about here? I would say the Bears. The Bears, since Thomas Brown has taken over the offense, they have just gotten rid of Gerald Everett. So Shane Waldron, what was this guy doing? You have these 3 wide receivers on the team, and look, I know, Ian, you love Gerald Everett, and he certainly looks good. The drip's always sweet. I love the visors he picks. He always looks great on the field, and actually good when he gets his opportunities. But look, we've got Keenan Allen here. We've got DJ Moore. We've got the first-round pick and Rome Odunze. If you look at the 11 personnel since Thomas Brown took over, 78% of their snaps have come with 3 wide receivers on the field. So they've really moved towards using all the wide receivers instead of the 2 tight end sets. And then that has really been big for these wide receivers. So if you look at them since Thomas Brown's taken over, each one of the Bears have put up, meaningful games. Like last week it was Rome Odunze. DJ Moore, man, he's had wide receiver 4, 6, and 30 finishes over the last 3 weeks. Keenan Allen, 6-4. He gave you a 44 dud. Rome Odunze, a little bit riskier, 37, 67, and 12, but he falls into that ceiling case that we've been talking about all along. Would you rather start Ray McLeod, or would you rather start a Rome Odunze? I would probably go Rome Odunze if I had Cooper Kupp already in my lineup. So these guys are all in play. I will say the one tricky part is one of them typically is left out. Even though they're all 3 on the field, it's still only enough to support 2, because Caleb Williams, man, is just such a roller coaster ride.
The one thing we got to consider at Rome Odunze too, guys, is his dad has been going nuts on Twitter, sticking up for his son. So maybe that storyline going on here. We've seen it over the years. Maybe one of the off-season studies we need to get into. Getting alive with that one, Dwayne. I want the correlation.
No, but it don't. Don't make this the Nick Westbrook-Akini show for Jake Ciely. Like, again, I want to make one thing clear. You may sound like I'm going with it. I have Jacoby Myers pushing my top 25 this week, and Westbrook-Akini is down in the 40s. I just said purely for ceiling because I got a 0 for Cooper Kupp. That's kind of the scenario. I want to make it clear that I'm not NWI for life over here.
No, we're gonna have a cut after the show on social media of you saying Nick Westbrook-Akini is better than Jacoby Myers. Don't worry, our production crew will make sure that you have that because they do that to us.
And all of the Bears too, 100%.
I can't believe Jake just said he would start Nick Westbrook-Akini over AJ Brown, but people have their takes, people have their ideas. It's
he loves
all
kickers
good,
too.
So. Yeah, exactly. Let's keep going down there. All right, fellas. Wide receiver hardest schedules, though. We do have the Jaguars, Colts, Lions, Cowboys, and Rams. So obviously saw, the Cooper Kupp dud already. I don't think we're too worried about CeeDee Lamb or Amon-Ra St. Brown. Maybe not exactly blowing up the box score, but still going to be tough to drop too far down the ranks. With the Colts, I think more of an issue of Anthony Richardson than any of the individual players. But Jake, wanted to ask you about a guy who I think arguably has been the best rookie wide receiver in the NFL all season this year. Brian Thomas Jr. having to deal with the Mac Jones experience, having to deal with a hard schedule as well. But you know what? Maybe this man is just good enough to make it happen anyway.
I think he might be also. Yes, not just a fan, but you can't see it, but I do have his signed football here behind me. That's how much of a fan of Brian Thomas I am. So this is going to be hard for me to not keep the rose-colored glasses on. But yeah, the last 2 games, even with Mac Jones, he's fine. The biggest thing you brought up is dealing with Mac Jones. Some of that was also dealing with Trevor Lawrence. Let's be clear. It just was the matchups were really tough 2 weeks in a row. Of course, you got the Eagles and the Vikings. But if you're looking at him going forward, yeah, the schedule doesn't look pretty. But even with this bouncing back and forth of quarterbacks, even with this bouncing back and forth of matchups. Oh, by the way, on the season, Brian Thomas, a wide receiver 1 in fantasy. You talk about chasing ceilings or being able to absorb the risk. I'm going to keep him in my lineup. I would put it this way. Every single week, you want the consistency of Myers or the up and down of Brian Thomas. You could pick between the two, but they'll be in the same wide receiver 2 tier for me. Is that you got to understand what we're saying here is a lot of contextual what you need in your lineup. But wide receiver 2s, both of them are the higher ceiling with Brian Thomas, the bigger risk. Jacoby Myers, the safer floor. But I'm going to try and keep Brian Thomas's ceiling and in my lineup, even with the bad matchups.
And honestly, with the matchup,
man, he's been since he's been healthy. Because remember, those first 2 games after Christian Kirk got hurt, he was dealing with that chest injury, and then he finally was able to get healthy. So these last 3 games healthy without Christian Kirk, obviously, we also lost Gabe Davis from the lineup. Target shares of 25, 24, and 37%. So even some of that floor that was bothering us earlier in the season, I don't know if it's as much of a concern now, Jake. I don't know where you are on it, but I mean, the last 3 games, 13.6, 18.7, and 16.6 PPR points per game. So the consistency's also been better. 3 games, small sample, but I think we also have a reason to lean into the sample because those are healthy games without Christian Kirk or without Gabe Davis. And now we also have Evan Ingram, who didn't practice yesterday with a shoulder injury. So this could be completely the Brian Thomas show this weekend. And to your point, these last few games, bad Trevor Lawrence or bad Mac Jones hasn't really necessarily held Brian Thomas Jr. down. So I think he's looking pretty good.
And again, the schedule
for this week too. Sorry to jump in. I was going to say the Jets. This isn't the Sauce Gardner from last year. I mean, we might just finding out that the Jets last year are kind of similar to bring up the Titans from last year. Is that when you have teams that are just so susceptible to one or the other, and people that just don't feel like they need to do one or the other against them, is maybe the Jets' pass defense is just pretty good and not complete shutdown because people were running on them so easily. I think we're finding out that Sauce Gardner in the secondary just might not be the shutdown secondary that we thought it would be. I think this is actually could lean to a favorable matchup this week.
Took the words right out of my mouth, Jake, because again, as much as it's a tougher matchup relative to the entire season, looking at just fantasy points, man, since week 10, we're talking about the Jets being dead last in EPA allowed per dropback. Then they get the Raiders, who are 29th. Then they get the Titans, who are 25th. So 3 defenses that, again, a couple months ago, were playing some good defensive football, but those days are quite a bit in the rearview mirror now. So right as I butchered that one, Jake, it is time for you to go, my friend. But thank you so much. Again, you do great work over at The Athletic, host of All In Fantasy. Everyone can follow you on the social webs at All In Kids. So anything else you want to get off your chest, my friend?
And president of Band Kickers, but you're my vice president. I'll give you that.
Okay. I'm right next to Jake, sitting shotgun.
If I ever die, you take it over.
Oh, come on. We're going to be here for hundreds of years, Jake, with modern technology. You know that. So, Jake, we appreciate you. We appreciate you guys continuing to tune in with us. We got some injury, not goodness, but injury reports to go over ahead of Week 15. Right after this quick word to our friends over at DraftKings. Grab your favorite team's jersey and some snacks and head to the couch for another Sunday of action-packed football. You can get even closer to the action with my partners at DraftKings, because right now, all new DraftKings customers who bet just $5 will get $150 in bonus bets if your bet wins. Just download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and sign up using the promo code FANTASYLIFE. The crown is yours. That's right. New customers get $150 in bonus bets if your bet wins after betting just $5. If sports betting is not yet available in your state, don't worry. You can still join in on all the fun with DraftKings Daily Fantasy and have the shot to win cash prizes. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. New customers use the promo code FANTASYLIFE and bet just $5 on any wager to get $150 in bonus bets if your bet wins. That's promo code FANTASYLIFE only at DraftKings Sportsbook. Love me some Jake Ciely, but I do not love me some of these quarterback injuries, Dwayne. Don't think we're going to have anyone, huge that's just going to be straight up out, but there also are some issues that maybe could warrant adjusting the ranks. Primarily, Justin Herbert now dealing with an ankle and thigh issue. He did not practice to start the week, was limited yesterday, but I saw some of the videos from practice. He does seem hobbled. Do you think there's a chance, Dwayne, we maybe see the Chargers revert back a bit to that weeks 1 through 4 run first style with how banged up Herbert looks right now?
Yeah, I do think it's a concern. I think Justin Herbert's going to play because he's a warrior. Like he's shown us, he's probably going to do that. But to your point, I think it's, calling back to that early season is a great call out by you, because we did see a much more run heavy version of the Chargers. And it turns out a lot of that was health related with Justin Herbert. So we could see them shell up a little bit this weekend. We also have Ladd McConkey, battling through an injury as well. So I will be moving both players down the ranks later today. So I would say Justin Herbert had more as a borderline QB1, probably going to be more of a mid-range QB2 based on this news. Ladd McConkey was sitting as a mid-range wide receiver 2, probably more of a low-end wide receiver 2 based on this news.
Spot on with you there. Otherwise, Bengals quarterback Joe Burrow is now dealing with a knee injury in addition to the right wrist, but still been limited in practice, still fully expected to start this week. Not looking as good, though. Saints quarterback Derek Carr, again, probably going to be out for the rest of the season with some of the financial stuff in his contract, but dealing with the left hand and concussion, he has not been practicing. Fully expecting Jake Haener to be under center this week. Similar sentiment with Giants quarterback Drew Lock. Just sucks seeing some of the best players in the league not be able to play when it matters most, Dwayne. But heel, left elbow injuries, hasn't been able to practice. We will be getting Tommy DeVito here this week ahead of a matchup with the Ravens. I've gotten a lot of DST questions, and I will say I do not think there's a DST I would rather play than the Baltimore Ravens this week. And honestly, guys, if you have the room on your bench, let's just keep playing the Giants, because not only are Drew Lock and Tommy DeVito in the league's 32nd ranked scoring offense bad in their own right, but both these guys are brutal taking sacks. They get the Falcons in week 16 and the Colts in week 17. So not great real life defenses, but the great real life defenses don't have these sort of matchups. And again, the fact that Falcons and Colts are at least still competitive enough to be in the playoff races, I am confident in going to the well with them against, again, the very worst offense in football. So only final note, Dwayne, would be the status of Raiders QB Aiden O'Connell ahead of Monday Night Football. Conveniently already kind of talked about Jacoby Myers, but dealing with that knee injury, how far are you dropping his pass game options if we are forced to deal with Desmond Ridder?
Because it is, the Monday night game, I've basically built my ranks assuming that Aiden O'Connell is out for the wide receivers. I've still got Aiden O'Connell as the starting quarterback, in the quarterback ranks, but very low. But just from the standpoint of, we know it's the late game, so people are forced into these decisions, right, sooner rather than later. So basically moving Jacoby Myers down to mid-range wide receiver 3. If I knew we had Aiden O'Connell, I would have him more as that borderline wide receiver 2 that Jake had talked about. Brock Bowers is still going to be in your top 3. You're playing Brock Bowers if you have him no matter what. But if Aiden O'Connell, if his knee is really this bad, I do think there's also a scenario where you would rather have Desmond Ridder out there. than Aiden O'Connell. So I think that's a bit of a challenge. I mean, I will say Aiden O'Connell, not a scrambler, not a guy that wins on mobility. I mean, this guy is as much of a statue as a statue can be, especially for a young quarterback who they typically move around more. So I'm just in a situation where I'm probably just going to leave those guys that way, even if we get encouraging news today on Aiden O'Connell.
Move on to some running back, stuff going on here. So speaking of those Raiders, it does look like Alexander Mattison will return from injury, practicing in full with that ankle issue. That said, Antonio Pierce, shout out, actually giving us some pretty good, depth chart information this year. They confirmed that Sincere McCormick will still be the starter. So got a lot of start-sit questions with Sincere. And guys, I understand what Zamir White did down the stretch last year. And I do think Sincere is going to be a good bet for around 15 touches per week, but still a chance Madison eats in that just a little bit, which is not ideal when we are, again, dealing with one of the worst offenses in football. So McCormick, still more of a borderline RB2, maybe even a higher end RB3, not someone who needs to be jammed in the lineups by any stretch of the imagination. Otherwise, just keep a slight eye on Aaron Jones, Raheem Mostert, and Raheem Blackshear, Panthers backup RB now with Jonathan Brooks out for the season. Expecting Jonesy to suit up for Monday Night Football. Mostert's a little bit more iffy. We saw Achane have a massive role with him sideline last week. And then if Blackshear's out, Chuba Hubbard might legit have a 100% snap rate out there, but we're starting him pretty much regardless. So a bit more concerned, though, Dwayne, with guys not practicing. Bucky Irving, Alvin Kamara, Tony Pollard, Kenneth Walker, DeAndre Swift, and most importantly, Amari DiMercado, all failing to practice here to start the week. So Bucky, we'll find out on Friday. Buccaneers been a bit wonky. Going to be the Sean Tucker show if not. Kamara just dealing with an illness, so I tend to not worry too much, but Kendre Miller is the next man up. Talked about Pollard, talked about Kenneth Walker previously this week. Dwayne, Zach Charbonnet, I know we say a lot, you need to start him in every single lineup. I think Charbonnet might be someone you actually need to start in every single lineup, assuming Walker's out.
Yeah, you have to start him in every single lineup. We've seen the 3 games now without Kenneth Walker this year, and the man gets absolutely fed, and he's done the most that you can do really with those touches. So he's been a high-end running back 1 in those 3 contests. So you're going to want to get him into lineups. I would also say if you do have Bucky Irving, I would definitely be trying to pick up Sean Tucker. He is available in most Yahoo leagues just to have a backup plan if you need it. Sean Tucker, I would expect to probably get 30-40% of the work. I think Rachaad White would be the top guy. It is a tough matchup against the Chargers, but I think Rachaad White moves into mid-range running back 2, high-end running back 2 territory if we don't have Bucky Irving. And then I think Sean Tucker moves into that boom-bust running back 3 range. So if you've got Bucky Irving, it's nice to have a little bit of an insurance policy there. I think the other big one here, Ian, I'd love your thoughts on is what about the Jets with Breece Hall? We saw the first version of what the backfield would be last week, and it was really it was a slight lean to Braylon Allen, but it was close to a dead even split. What makes it kind of tough to get overly excited about Braylon Allen or Isaiah Davis. Both going to get touches, but it's hard to say which one's going to score the touchdown, right? If they have it, if they get one rushing touchdown in the game, I think it's a coin flip as to who it goes to right now, and that's going to determine which one of these guys you want in your lineup. So I have them both probably being borderline running back 2 range because we've got all these teams back off of bye. Even if Breece Hall is out, it's hard to get too excited about either guy for me.
And it's unfortunate, man, because Braylon Allen was someone that we kind of anticipated having the chance to have a 3-down role. God forbid something did happen to Breece Hall. Isaiah Davis literally only had, I'm looking at it now, 9 touches during the first 13 weeks of the season, and then he rips off 13 last week. And honestly, Dwayne Braylon, I think, was playing a little bit better earlier in the year. His numbers as both a rusher and receiver, man, aren't all that efficient, is more the plotting type. I think they do have a bit of a thunder lightning dynamic going on here. So, man, Isaiah Davis, if we knew both guys were getting 10 touches, I think I maybe trust Davis more.
Yeah, Davis looked good last week. I don't want to fall victim to a small sample. I think either one of these guys, I do think they're a coin flip. I do agree Braylon Allen hasn't looked as good here recently, but early in the year he looked really good. So maybe he's dealing with some small injury or something of his own that we don't know about. Coaches don't always tell us everything if they don't have to. So I think the bottom line is, though, I don't think you're probably pushing either one of these guys, though, into what the highest you would say on either one of them. Even if you rank Isaiah Davis first, I agree it's a coin flip. What's the highest? Running back 25, 26, somewhere in
I
there.
was going to say 30, but yeah, probably 25,
Yeah,
26.
It's tough. It's tough. Yeah. So the lead guy you might have more as a high end running back 3. The second guy might be more of a mid range running back 3. That's just tough in a playoff situation to want to get either one into the lineup. If you have to, right, or if you need it and you got someone else hurt, great, take advantage of it. But I wouldn't be scrambling my lineups trying to get one of these guys in over a guy like Tony Pollard or someone like that.
100% with you there. So let's move on to some wide receivers, guys who should be good, practicing in full. Josh Downs coming off the bye had that shoulder injury, but no real concerns there after getting in the full session on Thursday. Michael Pittman fine as well for the Colts. Also should see Romeo Doubs returning. He has practiced in full in both practices this week, seemingly on his way to clearing the concussion protocol ahead of Sunday night. Also the Bills getting healthier. Keon Coleman with that wrist injury has been practicing in full all week. That said, guys, really wouldn't be surprised at all if we just still see Amari Cooper, Mac Hollins, and Khalil Shakur as the main 3 wide receivers. Like Dwayne, it's a great game setting, shootout environment and everything against the Lions. I get it. But man, Keon Coleman still, even if we know he's going to play, it's also a late afternoon setting. And I just would really struggle to even get him in the top 50.
Yeah, I don't think you can go there. It makes it a little bit more dicey for a guy like Amari Cooper, who's already only had a 63% route participation over the last 2 weeks in each game. And you're hoping that his role grows. We saw a little bit of a connection last week with Josh Allen, even though I wouldn't say quite a connection, but Josh was trying to force the ball to him. He led the team in targets. But Keon could eat into that. Right. And they clearly still want to have Mac Hollins on the field some because he does other things they want. He doesn't wear shoes to the game. So, you got to keep a guy like that on the field. So, yeah, it does make it's problematic. I don't think you can get Keon Coleman, in the lineup. I think it's a slight downgrade to Amari Cooper. I think Khalil Shakir's role is safe. Right. The way he's playing, the role he's in. I don't think they really changed that with the return of Keon Coleman, but it could hurt Amari Cooper.
Dwayne has Shakur, wide receiver 21. He's my wide receiver 23. We have Amari Cooper, though, wide receiver 37 and 42, respectively. So not quite the same feel good as Shakur, but again, still at least moving in the right direction. Dwayne, maybe we get our Coke head game back on. Jalen Coker practicing in full with that quad injury. Maybe could take away a little bit from Adam Thielen and company, but again, wouldn't be overly concerned with hooked on a Thielen continuing to support our fantasy livelihood. Also should see Rashad Bateman there, had that knee injury going to the bye. He is practicing in full though. So more questionable players. Lab McConkey still limited. CeeDee Lamb with the shoulder, although he's been playing through this all season long. Jalen Waddle, Dwayne, maybe a bit more concerning with that hamstring injury. Wasn't on the injury report last week, and he has been limited in both games. So at least a little bit noteworthy as well. The Dolphins have parted ways with Odell Beckham Jr. I guess if Waddle would be out, which again, not saying he will be, Malik Washington, next man up.
Yeah, it would be Malik. And Malik had really been moving in a positive direction over these last 3 games. It had been a split role between him and OBJ. So we had seen the team move towards the rookie, and now we've got the release of OBJ. Who knows if it's a locker room thing or what it is, but they were already moving in this direction. That might have been why OBJ, he might have been mad about that. So yes, if we don't have Jalen Waddle, I do think Malik Washington, especially if you're playing in like DFS, things like that, if you're out in the prop streets, I think that there's something to like here. I mean, he could probably step into the role that we see for Jalen Waddle and do some. I'm not saying he's Jalen Waddle, a top 4 pick in the NFL draft just a few years ago out of Alabama. Like Jalen Waddle is a really good player, and we forget how good because he has to share the pie so many ways. But yeah, Malik Washington, man, great run after the catch player. So he can do the things they want, getting into the windows they want. They can get him in motion, do all those sort of things that are going to unlock more potential for him. So yeah, I think Malik Washington, if Jalen Waddle were to be out, I would put in the boom bust wide receiver 4 territory.
Ooh. He really is good with the ball in his hands. Saw that all preseason long. I think his first touchdown was on a reverse. Good stuff there for the rookie. Otherwise, Malik Neighbors is practicing in a limited fashion. Good to see. He should be good to go for Sunday. And honestly, didn't look too much worse for the wear while playing through the issue last week. Jacoby Myers limited with an ankle injury. Not usually worried about it, though. He's been playing through this most of the year. Darnell Mooney with a foot limited, seemingly on track for Monday Night Football. And DK Metcalf with the shoulder. Yes, he did go from full practice to limited, but last week he went limited at DNP all the way up to full and then had no status. So they are obviously managing the shoulder issue, not expecting it to keep him out though ahead of Sunday. Guy's not looking as good though. Well, I should say Mike Evans not practicing. This was also the case last week with the hamstring injury. So last week he was DMP, LP, and then not listed. This week back-to-back DMPs, but not too worried. Maybe a bit more concerned for Sterling Shepard not practicing. If he is out, good news for Jalen McMillan and probably Cade Otton as well. Not looking good for Steelers wide receiver George Pickens. Back-to-back DMPs. Late afternoon start. Mike Tomlin already did say that he is considered fairly doubtful. Noah Brown for the Commanders looking like he actually will be out for the season. So expect more Diami Brown, Olamide Zaccheaus, and maybe, just maybe, Luke McCaffrey, obviously working as the second, third, and fourth bananas behind Terry McLaurin. Also, Javon Baker and Bub Means not looking great to make their respective returns to action. But I think the feature situation for wide receivers and tight ends is what's going on in Cleveland, because David Njoku had a hamstring injury pop up, man. That's kept him sidelined for both practices. Was seeming to be Jordan Akins as the next man up, but we did actually hear Stefanski say going to be a bit more of a committee situation. But at that same time, maybe they are getting Cedric Tillman back, been in the concussion protocol for the last few weeks. He has been limited in each of these first two practices. So let's assume, Dwayne, that Njoku's out of the picture. How are you ranking these wide receivers ahead of, again, as we mentioned earlier, a more winnable matchup against the Chiefs, maybe look like a better season?
Yeah, I mean, Jerry Jeudy's already locked into that mid-range wide receiver 2 with upside. I don't think that really changes here, because I think that Cedric Tillman getting back into the lineup, like that just basically takes the spot of David Njoku's targets, right? And we know Elijah Moore's also been involved. So we've been without Cedric Tillman for the last 2 games due to the concussions. And look, we've seen David Njoku put up 26 points, 17 points. Jerry Jeudy's put up 39 and 17, and Elijah Moore's put up 19 and 6. So in one of those games, we had all 3 of these wide receivers support, or all 3 pass catching targets supported by Jameis Winston. And in the other one, we saw 2 out of 3. So you probably want to try to find a way to have all these guys in your lineup. I mean, Jameis just gives you so much upside. For Cedric Tillman, this would be an upgrade. I kind of had him in a territory where I was like, well, I'm not going to force it this week, but we know coming off concussions, guys are 100%, right? Once they're back in the lineup, it's not like they're dealing with a soft tissue injury that's going to re-flare up. This guy should be good to go as far as he understands the offense. He's in sync with Jameis, and it could easily be him, not Jerry Jeudy, as the wide receiver 1 for the team. So I was just looking at this one this morning before the show. I have him in wide receiver 4 territory right now. He at least has to get into boom bust wide receiver 3 status for me, Ian, trying to figure out like how high I'm going to push him. I'm just looking at it right now. I'm thinking probably pushing him into the range where I've got Jalen Waddle, Malik Neighbors, Jacoby Myers, Jamison Williams. I think he's probably in that tier with J-Mo and Waddle for sure, assuming Waddle plays. I think he's in that same tier with those 2 guys. Passing offenses, we know that it can explode. Guys that can give you big plays. I think that's probably his tier. So that would make him a mid-range to high-end wide receiver 3, depending on where you land with it.
Only other injuries to really worry about, tight end Dalton Kincaid should be returning from that knee issue. He is practicing in full. Guys limited, though: Trey McBride, Juwan Johnson, and Luke Musgrave. Not overly concerned about any of them, but again, keep an eye. I guess the bigger one to actively worry about would be Evan Ingram, not practicing both days with the shoulder. However, Doug Peterson did say Wednesday he anticipated Ingram playing this week. But again, just keep an eye on that. Should be plenty of Bretton Strange if not. And then also Will Dissly out for the Chargers with a shoulder seemingly. So Stone Cole Smart, the guy's middle name is Cole, so I think we can go ahead and just call him Stone Cold Smart. And yes, he should be the Chargers tight end 1. Wouldn't get too carried away though, guys. We have no idea if he is going to have the full-time role, but hey, prospective bench stash signed me up there. So that was your injury report. But guys, before we get out of here, time for some bold predictions. Setting the mood just right, Dwayne. And why not? We had another 2-2 week last week. For the first time in forever, I actually got a couple right. Tyron Tracy and Khalil Shakur, solid afternoons at the office. And you didn't exactly dud, man. Calvin Ridley and Jacoby Myers still found their way to, 13 plus fantasy points each. Just didn't maybe have the booms to count as a win here in bold predictions. But new week, new us. And accordingly, Dwayne, a lot to like here about certain Commanders RB.
Yeah, give me Brian Robinson for 115 yards and 2 touchdowns. What could go wrong? We've tried this guy multiple times this year, Ian. Now, injuries have rendered them null. He got hurt in the first quarter, I believe, the last time one of us tried to use him. There was another game where I can't remember what happened whenever you used him. It was something weird as well. So let's just say Brian Robinson Jr., we haven't seen him healthy really for most of the season. since like the first 3 games. He's been dealing with nagging knee, hamstring issues, but he got the bye week, should be fully healthy. We still don't have Austin Eckler. And here's the thing. He's averaged 15.5 fantasy points in the games where he's had at least 50% of the snaps. He's doing that this weekend. Like, I think he's going to be probably 60% of the snaps. So I think he gives you mid-range running back 1 upside. I've got him as a mid-range running back 2. That means he should be in most fantasy lineups. I really like him against the Saints this weekend. This is a game I could see the Commanders winning by 21 points. They're coming off the bye. You've got Jake Haener starting at quarterback. I mean, the Saints season is over. The Commanders have everything to play for. So really like Brian Robinson Jr. in this spot.
Smash spot, get him in those lineups. And I would probably start him ahead of my guy, James Cook. But that said, I do still think there's plenty of upside on the table. Give me 120 yards and 2 touchdowns. Again, Lions D has been good, but now we're not talking about the starting Lions D. We're talking about all sorts of backups in the front 7. And I just think in this Bills offense, we know they can put up points. We know Cook can be this multifaceted dual threat playmaker he's been for most of the years. I'd be very surprised if he goes another week dudding. So big game for James Cook, as again the leading rusher inside one of the league's best offenses. Dwayne, your second bowl call is going to go to a wide receiver, not Nick Westbrook-Akini, but his teammate.
Yeah, I'm going back to the well on Calvin Ridley. Like you mentioned, it wasn't the boom we hoped for last week against the Jaguars defense. Very bad. And look, when you have a quarterback like Will Levis, this is the nature of the game. But unlike the Bears where you got Caleb Williams, it's Calvin Ridley. Yes, Nick Westbrook-Akini occasionally catches a touchdown, but he's not out here hogging targets. Calvin Ridley has a 38% target share last week. So the process was right, Ian. And then since DeAndre Hopkins has been gone, man, a 30% target share for Calvin Ridley and an 8.2 utilization score. So even with the ups and downs at quarterbacks, which honestly have been more ups over the last 4 to 5 weeks for Will Levis in this matchup against the Bengals, I really like it. So if you look at the Bengals, just against pass catchers as a whole, right? Running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, you put it all together, they've been worth a 13.7 fantasy boost to opposing offenses over the last 4 games. The Bengals secondary has been terrible. So yeah, give me Calvin Ridley in a game where I think he goes off, what did I say? 100. I did 108 yards and 1 touchdown.
Yeah.
I have a feeling that you're going to call me lame though. Like I should have said 2 touchdowns.
As long as you hit exactly 108, Dwayne, I will count it. That would be some special stuff right there. I'm going to close things out, though, with Browns wide receiver Elijah Moore. Talked about him a bit on our ranking show, so I won't go too deep. But 8 catches, 99 yards, and a touchdown. Just think with Njoku out against this Chiefs defense that, again, has been legit bottom 5 for the better part of the last month and a half, and more advanced passing metrics than not. Really good situation where we could see maybe a sneaky shootout. And accordingly, I just want exposure to all of Jameis's wide receivers. So, hey guys, wide receiver 21, 60, 14, 60, 15, 52 since Jameis came under center. We have seen some relative booms for Elijah, and I think another one is on the way. So that's going to do it for us, though. We appreciate you guys tuning into the Fantasy Life Show all season long. Best of luck in those fantasy playoffs, and we'll be back next week to get you guys ready for those semifinals. So thank you again to Jake Ciely for stopping by, and otherwise for Dwayne, for producer Matt, for producer Kelsey, I'm Ian. Thanks again for tuning into the Fantasy Life Show, and until next time, take care, everybody.